The fluorescent lights of Northwestern Memorial's maternity wing had a way of making everything look more fragile than it was. The paper cups, the plastic chairs, the careful smiles of nurses who had seen too much. Hallie Dunning had learned this over the past 4 appointments, the quiet ones. The ones she came to alone, with her clipboard of prenatal questions that no one ever helped her ask. She was 34 years old, 8 months pregnant, and the only woman in the waiting room without a hand to hold. Her husband, Maxwell Dunning, had promised he would come. He said that every time. Hallie had stopped saving him a parking spot. She sat near the window, watching the sleet track down the glass in uneven lines, her phone open to the ultrasound photo she'd made her wallpaper 3 weeks ago. She hadn't changed it, even after everything. The baby was still the only thing in her life that felt entirely honest. Then the elevator at the end of the hall chimed open. The sound of heels on hospital tile, sharp and deliberate, made her look up. Everyone in the waiting room looked up. That was the thing about Vivica Rowe. She always made everyone look. 29 years old, VP of Communications at Dunning Capital Ventures. The woman whose name Hallie had first heard in a voicemail she wasn't supposed to find. Voicemail Maxwell had left on the wrong phone, in the wrong jacket pocket, in the wrong life. Vivica's coat was camel-colored cashmere. Her lips were painted burgundy. She paused 3 feet from Hallie's chair and looked at her the way people look at something they're deciding whether to step over. "You still come to these?" Vivica said. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. That was the worst part. Hallie kept her hands flat against her thighs. "You need to leave." "He's not coming, you know." Vivica tilted her head. "He told me this morning. He said he didn't know how to keep doing this, playing husband to someone he's already moved on from." The words landed carefully, like they'd been rehearsed, probably because they had been. "I'm asking you to leave," Hallie said again. Vivica stepped closer, too close. The way she reached out, quick, sharp fingers wrapping around Hallie's forearm, didn't look like an accident. It wasn't meant to. She yanked Hallie sideways by the arm, hard enough that Hallie's center of gravity shifted, hard enough that she stumbled from the chair and went down onto one knee on the linoleum, her other hand slamming against the wall to catch herself. The impact sent a bolt of pain from her wrist to her shoulder. Then came the sound, a nurse at the far end of the hall, shouting, a waiting room of faces turning all at once. Vivica's expression cracking open with something she hadn't planned for, panic. A security officer appeared from the stairwell. Vivica stepped back, once, twice. Her clutch slipped from her arm and hit the floor, and when she grabbed for it, she knocked something loose. A keycard, a tube of lip gloss, and something smaller that skidded beneath a chair and came to rest under the fluorescent light. A white business card with a number written in green ink. Vivica didn't stop for it. She walked fast toward the elevator, heels ringing against the tile like something closing behind her. The nurse reached Hallie before the doors had shut. "Mrs. Dunning, the baby." "I don't know," Hallie said. Her voice had finally started to shake. They got her into an exam room in under 2 minutes. The fetal monitor picked up its rhythm almost immediately, steady, stubborn, alive. And the sound of it made Hallie close her eyes and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 8 months. The baby was fine. Hallie was not in any way that would show on a monitor. The security officer recovered the business card from beneath the chair. A nurse photographed it before bagging it as evidence. Someone called the police. No one called Maxwell. Hallie asked them not to. Her father found out anyway. Arthur Welling arrived at Northwestern Memorial 50 minutes after the incident, still wearing his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He was 67 years old, broad-shouldered, with the particular stillness that comes from 30 years on the federal bench. He had presided over fraud trials, racketeering cases, corporate conspiracies that filled file boxes from floor to ceiling. He had watched men lie under oath and come to believe their own lies by the close of argument. He thought he had seen everything people were capable of doing to one another. Then he walked into the exam room and saw his daughter sitting upright in a hospital gown, with an ice pack on her wrist, and the look on her face of someone who has decided not to cry yet. "Dad," Hallie said, and something in her voice came apart very quietly. He sat beside her and took her hand and said nothing for a long moment. The monitor kept its rhythm. Outside, sleet ticked against the glass. "I've already seen the footage," he said. Quentin pulled it. Quentin Pruitt had been Arthur's chief of staff for 11 years, and in that time had learned to anticipate needs before they were spoken aloud. By the time Arthur arrived at the hospital, Quentin had already requested all surveillance recordings from the maternity floor, logged the recovered business card as potential evidence, and placed a call to the Chicago Police Department's assault unit. He was 41, precise and deeply loyal in the quiet way that actually counts. "She's on camera," Arthur said, clear as anything. "I don't want headlines," Hallie said immediately. "Not again. I spent 4 months reading about my own marriage in gossip columns, and I can't." "This is not gossip," her father said evenly. "This is a criminal assault on a pregnant woman inside a hospital. That's a different thing entirely." She looked at him. His eyes were steady, and she saw something she hadn't let herself read before. He was angry. Deeply, deliberately, quietly angry. The kind he had reserved, in all her years of watching him work, for the cases that actually mattered. "What does Quentin think?" she asked. "Quentin thinks we move before she does." The story of how Hallie Welling became Hallie Dunning was the kind that seemed, in retrospect, to contain all its own warnings. She had met Maxwell 6 years ago at a fundraising dinner for the Chicago Architecture Foundation. He was charming in the specific way of men who understand that charm is a tool, deployed with precision, never wasted. He had built Dunning Capital Ventures from a 3-investor seed fund to a mid-sized private equity firm on Michigan Avenue. And he wore the accomplishment with just enough self-awareness to be attractive. He was funny, attentive, interested in her work in a way that felt real at the time. Her father had met him once before the engagement and said very little afterward. When Hallie pressed him, Arthur said, "He's the kind of man who keeps score. Watch whether he keeps it with you or against you." She was 28 and certain she understood something her father didn't. The first 2 years of the marriage were, in the superficial ways that count in Chicago society, a success. Maxwell's firm grew. Hallie opened her own landscape architecture practice and landed 3 contracts in her first year. They hosted dinners in their Streeterville apartment, attended the right openings, knew the right people. They were, by every visible measure, a couple ascending. Then Maxwell hired Vivica Rowe. Vivica was genuinely brilliant at her job, which made the rest of it harder to explain away. She rebuilt Dunning Capital's public profile from mid-tier to aspirational inside 18 months. She cultivated the right journalists, attended the right events, understood exactly how image functions as currency. Maxwell told Hallie she was indispensable. Hallie believed him. She wanted to. The signs came slowly, the way they always do. A hotel receipt for a city Maxwell had claimed to skip. A text notification on his screen that he covered too quickly. Instagram stories from Vivica's account that kept placing her, obliquely, in the same frame as Maxwell. A reflection in a lobby window, a hand at the edge of a restaurant photo, a caption that meant nothing and somehow meant everything. When Hallie confronted him, Maxwell was calm in the way she had learned to distrust. "You're reading into things," he said, not unkindly. "The stress is getting to you. You need rest." He said it the same way each time, like a rehearsed line that had been smoothed into something that sounded spontaneous. She stopped talking about it. 6 months pregnant, she packed what she needed one evening while Maxwell was at a client dinner, and she moved into the spare room of her father's home on the North Shore. She told herself it was temporary. It felt permanent the moment she set her bag down. Arthur had wanted to act. Old guilt held him back. The guilt of a father who had been professionally present and personally distant for too many years, who had pushed when she was young and watched her pull away, who had learned restraint too well and at the wrong times. He waited. He watched his daughter grow quieter and more careful. He would not wait much longer. Vivica Rowe was not the kind of woman who accepted consequences quietly. By the morning after the hospital incident, she was already moving. She had contacts at 3 Chicago outlets and 2 lifestyle blogs, and within 12 hours of the assault she had fed each of them a version of the same story. Hallie Dunning was controlling and emotionally volatile, had a documented history of irrational behavior, and had initiated a confrontation at the hospital that Vivica had simply been trying to exit. The incident had been an argument. Vivica was a bystander. The posts went up that afternoon. Pregnant socialite causes scene at Northwestern Memorial. Sources close to Maxwell Dunning say wife has been struggling for months. One ran a photo of Hallie from a charity event weeks earlier. Her expression caught mid-sentence and unflattering, captioned with nothing but a question mark. Which was, as far as these things go, a particular cruelty. Hallie found out lying in her hospital bed, with her phone screen too bright in the dim room. She put the phone face down and stared at the ceiling. Quentin arrived within the hour, carrying a folder and a coffee from a place 2 blocks away that Hallie had mentioned in passing once, and he had apparently memorized. He set both on the table beside her bed and did not waste time. "She's been busy," he said. "I know. She's also been careless." He opened the folder, printed wire transfers, email headers, invoices organized into a tight sequence. Vivica runs a communications consulting LLC registered in Illinois. For the past 8 months, that LLC has been receiving monthly retainer payments from a holding account connected to Dunning Capital. The retainer is coded as media relations. He paused. "She's been using company funds to run a personal PR operation, including what she's doing to your reputation right now." Hallie looked at the documents. Maxwell funded this. "It appears so. Whether he directed the specifics or simply handed her the resources and looked away, that's the legal question." "He knew," Hallie said, not with anger, with the particular tone of someone stating a thing they've known for a long time and finally stopped arguing against. Arthur arrived while Quentin was finishing. He stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the winter skyline over Lake Michigan while Quentin briefed him. When Quentin stopped speaking, Arthur was quiet for a moment. "The Welling Foundation dinner is in 3 weeks," he said. His voice had the cadence of someone thinking aloud but already at the destination. The Langham. Every investor who has ever done business with Dunning Capital, every journalist in this city who covers wealth and society, every person whose opinion Maxwell Dunning has spent a decade carefully tending. "You want to use it," Quentin said. "I want her to walk in thinking she owns the room," Arthur said, turning from the window. "And I want to be there when she understands that she doesn't." Hallie was discharged 3 days later. She went to her father's house and rested and let her body do its work. She tried not to read the comment sections. She mostly succeeded. What surprised her were the private messages, not from journalists, but from women. Strangers who had seen the gossip posts, who had somehow found her, who wrote to say, "I know what this feels like, the isolation, the manufactured doubt. The way someone can make your own pain look like instability to anyone watching from the outside." She read everyone. On the morning of the foundation dinner, she stood in the spare room in a midnight blue dress that fell softly over the fullness of her belly. She looked at herself for a long time. Her father knocked and opened the door a crack. He had the look he sometimes wore that saw someone earlier than the person standing in front of him. Something younger, still recoverable. "You don't have to do anything tonight but be present," he said. "I know," she said. "I want to be there." The Langham Ballroom was everything Maxwell had always wanted access to. Crystal and candlelight. A string quartet in the corner, playing something restrained and perfect. Conversations conducted at the careful volume of people who understand that being overheard is always a risk. Every surface was polished. Every person in the room had been selected by someone, for something. Hallie arrived on her father's arm. The room shifted in the specific way rooms do when someone enters who is expected to stay away. She let them look. She had nothing to hide anymore. Vivica arrived 40 minutes into the evening. She wore champagne silk and the expression of a woman who believes she is the one setting the terms. She came in with a photographer, which was not subtle, but was extremely deliberate. She was going to generate her own coverage, stand in this room, smile, and let the story reset around her. She spotted Hallie from across the ballroom. Their eyes met. Vivica's chin lifted slightly. Quentin appeared at Arthur's shoulder. "She's here." "I see her," Arthur said, and moved toward the stage. What happened next took less than 4 minutes, which was part of why it worked. Arthur took the microphone. He thanked the guests, acknowledged the foundation's work, and said, without particular drama, that before the evening's program continued, there was something he believed everyone in the room deserved to see. The lights dimmed. The projection screen behind the stage, ordinarily used for foundation slideshows, flickered on. The security footage was clear and time-stamped. Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The maternity wing waiting area. Vivica's hand closing around Hallie's forearm. The force of it. Hallie going down to one knee, her palm slamming the wall. 7 seconds of footage, shown in full, shown again, shown a third time at half speed. The ballroom was completely silent. Then came the audio. Quentin had found it in the hospital's ambient mic system, a voice capture from a nurse's station near the waiting room, imperfect but unmistakable. Vivica's voice, recorded in the moment before she walked away. She had it coming. She never deserved any of it. Vivica stood in the center of the room, surrounded by 200 people who were no longer looking at anything else. "You can't do this," she said. The voice came out smaller than she intended. Arthur's voice, without the microphone, was steady and clear enough to carry across the silence. "Miss Rowe, you walked into a maternity ward where my daughter was waiting for a prenatal appointment, and you put your hands on her. You spent the days that followed trying to convince this city that she had provoked it." He paused. "We let you make that case. We wanted everyone here to see exactly what it looks like." The photographer who had arrived with Vivica quietly lowered the camera and backed toward the door. Vivica stood alone under the chandelier. For a moment she said nothing. Then she turned and walked out without looking at Hallie. The room exhaled. Hallie felt her father's hand on her shoulder and realized she had been holding her breath for the past 4 minutes. "Is it over?" she asked. "That part," Arthur said. "The rest belongs to the courts." Maxwell came to the house 2 days later. He looked like a man who had not slept or eaten anything that mattered. His firm had already lost 3 investor commitments in the 48 hours since the gala footage had circulated. His name was appearing in the financial press in ways that had nothing to do with returns. Hallie let him in. She sat across from him in the living room with winter light coming through the window and listened while he explained himself. He said he hadn't known what Vivica would do. He said he'd only meant to manage the situation. He said he still cared about her, which was possibly true, in the narrow and insufficient way that some people care about things they've already decided to lose. "You knew who she was," Hallie said. "You knew how she operated. You paid for it." Maxwell's hands were on his knees. He didn't answer. "I'm not asking you to explain yourself," she said. "I'm telling you that I understand it now, and I'm done." She handed him the divorce filing. Her attorney had drafted it the week she left the hospital. Maxwell looked at the documents for a long moment. His jaw worked. He signed. It took less than 5 minutes. The criminal trial was scheduled for February. Vivica was charged with aggravated battery. The prosecution's evidence included the hospital footage, the audio recording, the financial records tracing the smear campaign to Dunning Capital accounts, and a series of emails recovered from Vivica's firm's server, including one sent 2 days before the hospital incident. Subject line: "Go this week, before the next appointment." The defense argued emotional distress. The prosecution played the footage, then the audio, then the email. Hallie did not attend the trial. She was in the hospital when the verdict came through, not the maternity wing this time, but labor and delivery, which was different in every way that mattered. Quentin called at 11:14 in the morning. Guilty, 18 months plus mandatory counseling and a 5-year restraining order. At 11:51 a.m., Hallie's daughter was born. She was small and stubborn and loud, which Hallie took as excellent character. Arthur was in the waiting room. When the nurse came to tell him, he sat very still for a moment. Then he removed his reading glasses, pressed the back of his hand against his mouth, and the nurse found somewhere else to look. Maxwell settled the civil suit out of court. He paid a substantial sum in damages and stepped back from daily operations at Dunning Capital. He sent Hallie a brief handwritten note 3 weeks later. She read it once and put it away, not with anger, but with the finality of someone who has already turned the page. The Welling Foundation launched a new initiative that spring, the Catherine Welling Fund for Maternal Safety, named for Hallie's mother. It funded security upgrades in hospital maternity wards across Illinois, legal advocacy for pregnant women navigating family court, and a statewide reporting hotline for partner violence. The first 3 years were funded by the civil damages. The fourth year was funded by donations from people Arthur had never met. 3 months after the verdict, on a Tuesday in April, when Chicago finally smelled like something other than winter, Hallie sat in the back garden of her father's house, with her daughter asleep against her chest. The garden was her own design. She had sketched it during the long, quiet weeks of her third trimester, when she needed something to think about that was not fear. Native grasses along the fence line, a honey locust near the gate, a flagstone path that curved instead of running straight, because straight paths, she had always believed, were for people who don't yet know that something worth finding is usually around a corner. Her phone was on the table beside her. She picked it up when the notification came through. A message from an unknown number. I watched everything from the beginning. I've been in something like this for 3 years. After the footage from the dinner went public, I finally called the hotline. I just wanted someone to know that what you did mattered to someone who never met you. No name, no way to write back. Hallie read it twice. She set the phone down. Her daughter stirred against her chest, one tiny fist opening and closing against the fabric of Hallie's shirt. The honey locust moved in the April breeze at the far end of the garden. Arthur came through the back door with 2 cups of tea and sat in the chair across from her without speaking. They had learned over these past months to sit in comfortable silence. That was something they hadn't known how to do before all of this. "Dad," Hallie said. Thank you for not waiting this time." He looked at her over his cup. His face was tired, but it was the right kind of tired now. The kind you earn by doing something that cost you something, and coming out the other side knowing it was worth the cost. "I should have moved sooner," he said. "You moved when I was ready," she said. "That's the difference." He accepted that. They drank their tea. The afternoon held them both, and Hallie's daughter slept on, small and unconcerned, breathing through the ordinary miracle of a safe afternoon in a garden that no one would ever take from them.